Why do Logic beats not hit as hard as Ableton? My understanding of DAWs is if you bring in an audio file into Ableton, and then you bring an audio file into Logic, if it's the same exact file with no effects and nothing, those two files are going to sound identical in both DAWs, for the most part. Maybe Logic might turn it down a little bit, or if you bring it into simpler, the level might be a little quieter. But when people start saying drums hit harder in this DAW or that DAW, you got to really look at all of the elements that could be affecting it. For one, when you load a sound in the FL Studio, by default, it's a little bit quieter. So that's something to keep in mind. If you load a sound into simpler and then you pitch it, it actually sounds bad by default in simpler. I talked on my stream about how to make it sound good. I have a couple things. If the kick you're bringing in to Logic, and this is a real thing, this is where the sound engine really does differ. Logic cannot support 32-bit files getting imported in. So if you have a kick drum that's over the threshold of 0 decibels mixed down in 32-bit, if you load it into FL Studio, it's gonna be perfect. You can turn it down, play it, turn it up, whatever. Ableton, when you mix down in 32-bit, it will maintain being a 32-bit kick. However, with Logic, when you load in a kick that's over 0 decibels, it literally will change it to a 24-bit file and the top of the kick will get completely cut off. If you're using kicks that go above 0 decibels, it's not gonna sound as good in Logic because Logic actually changes the bit depth of that sound. That's the problem I have with Logic. That's one reason why I don't use Logic. If you bring a sound into Logic that's 32-bit, it will automatically change it over to 24-bit. Someone like me who does sound design, sometimes there might be a time when I will mix something down above 0 decibels and I'll wanna go back to it later and work on it, do some shit. That's just how I work. I work above 0 decibels sometimes. But a program like Logic is literally not built to be able to handle that. So if I load that sound into Logic, it's gonna completely make it unusable. That's my problem with Logic. Other than that, I hear a lot of good things about it for producers. I work differently. I do sound design, I produce. Logic does not support sounds over 0 decibels. I'm not one to say that one DAW has a better sound engine than another, but to be real, basically what I'm saying is Logic's sound engine sucks. And that's why it sucks. The reason Logic's sound engine sucks is because it does not support 32-bit files when you drag them in. Compared to FL Studio, compared to Ableton and other DAWs, Logic sound engine sucks. I'm gonna say it straight up. But on the other hand, if you work in 24-bit, then it's totally fine. It's the same as any other DAW. My beef with Logic is I cannot load in a 32-bit file without that file getting compressed down, the bit depth changed to 24-bit. For me, it's a big deal because I do sound design. For someone who just produces and works with the samples in Logic and never loads in a 32-bit file, that might be fine for them. But for me, it ain't it. I work in 32-bit float. Logic does work in 32-bit when you're in the DAW, but you can't bring in a 32-bit file. That's backwards to me. In 2021, all DAWs should, in my opinion, support 32-bit. And that's why I do not use Logic, and I'm just not interested. I got Pro Tools. That's my thought. Anyone can argue this with me, but if a DAW does not support 32-bit, it's handicapped. If I can't load in a kick drum that's 32-bit without it changing the bit depth to 24-bit, in my opinion, it's handicapped. That's my thought. DECAP.